Hello everyone, what's up? It's been 2 months since I uploaded my review for the Malazan Book of the Fallen, Book 1, Gardens of the Moon, and I was absolutely blown away by how good that book was. And I've just finished Deadhouse Gates. I have gone on the journey through through 7 cities through this book, and it was something else. I walked the chain of dogs, and it was absolutely brutal and so interesting, and I have so many thoughts and so many notes to talk about in my review. I'm going to try to do this in a somewhat organized fashion, but I'm not sure how well that's going to work out because my brain is just scattered by all that I beheld, all the raw thoughts that I felt when reading this book. So I'd like to, I think, sort of give an introduction to the setting of Deadhouse Gates and try to provide the background lore information. This is going to be a full spoiler video. There's just no way I can talk about this book in a How do you do a spoiler-free book review of this book? I just don't know. So first of all, I'd like to kind of give my thoughts on what the setting for the book is and try to provide the background on what is 7 Cities and where is it set. I'd like to comment on the tonal contrast that I noted between this and Gardens of the Moon. At the end, I'd like to talk about which I prefer between this and Gardens of the Moon. The middle is going to be the best I can for a plot recall of this book. That's probably going to test my chronology off the top of the dome with just a couple notes. And it's going to be hard to do, but I'm going to attempt to. There's, just like Gardens of the Moon, there are so many characters spinning around here, so many plot threads spinning around here, and it's just jam-packed full of tons of good stuff. And as I go through the plot, I'm going to kind of also discuss what parts of the plot I really liked and where I wasn't enjoying it so much. Overall, this book, this is a masterpiece. I absolutely love this book. It was a wild journey, and it was something else. It was immense. The emotions, it was a roller coaster. It really was. I know that's a cliche to say, but I really felt that it was. So what is Deadhouse Gates about? I'm going to try to provide a sort of background on that. So first of all, Gardens of the Moon is set with the Malazan Empire trying to conquer the continent of Genebacus. Some of it is set on Coltaine, which is the main continent where the Malazan Empire has kind of sprung from, and that's kind of in the middle. So in your mind, picture a map. Coltaine's in the middle, Genebacus is over here, they're invading it. Then there's this other conquered continent called 7 Cities. And we know a little bit about 7 Cities from Book 1. We know that Callum was from 7 Cities, a member of the Bridgeburners, who became a claw assassin and servant of the Empire. We know that Quick Ben was from 7 Cities as well. These were locals of this place that got taken over by the Malazan Empire when it invaded and kind of brought it under its power. So the 7 Cities continent was conquered by the Malazans, and they took it under Emperor Kellanved and Dancer's rule, and it became a part of the Empire. So a lot of the bridge burners that we read about in Book 1, they have been to 7 Cities. They fought in campaigns at 7 Cities, so they know just how brutal it is. And in Book 1, Gardens of the Moon, they talked about that 7 Cities was on the verge of revolt. So the people are going to try to spring up and get back at the Malazans who conquered them so long ago. So they know that it's volatile over there, that it's deadly over there. They know that it's bad news over there. It is not looking good, apparently, in 7 Cities. The locals are angry, and they want to take over again, the continent. And I will say, I had very mixed feelings. These books, don't get it twisted, there's no bad guys and good guys. But you kind of feel for the natives of 7 Cities. They are a people who were conquered by a powerful empire that came in and conquered them with very little respect for their cultures and beliefs. They basically took them over. They are a conquered land. But the tactics and brutal nature of the Seven Cities rebellions throughout the book quickly turned me against them. I found myself siding with an obviously flawed empire, but I found myself pulling for the Malazans as they are fighting against the Seven Cities locals. The Seven Cities locals on this continent are absolutely brutal. Also, the setting for Seven Cities, it's a desert continent. So I pictured it as being the Wild West, the Middle East, just an absolute, a dangerous desert with rocks and barren, very little water, dusty, sun beaming down on your head. As a Star Wars fan, I thought of Tatooine. This continent is absolutely just not a place that you'd like to survive. The continent of Genebacus had fields and lakes and forests and mountains, and it was very lovely. Great setting for a fantasy adventure. And this just feels brutal. The continent just feels like such a lawless land, a real Wild West. It's a barren desert where people and factions, they're constantly at war. And the reason for this is from that they're a very religious people, and they have prophecies dating back for centuries, and laws and specific customs and shapes and all of this kind of stuff that fuels just this bitter, raw vengeance and hatred. And they use that, the people there. It's just a very brutal feeling place. It's a very lawless feeling place. And as the book progressed, the bodies, they just piled up, and it really you feel the stakes and the weight of what a war with the Malazan Empire is all about, because you just feel the heat of this intense hatred as people are killed in gruesome and brutal and gory and vile ways, killed and slaughtered by these natives who had been subdued and are waiting for their time to strike. It's a very tumultuous feeling environment to read. It's very gritty, very brutal. And so this sets the tone to be not darker per se than the first one, but just higher octane, more intense action, just brutal. It felt like a more of a slasher film version of fantasy at times. And it is sometimes a tough read. It does get a little heavy with some of the subject matter that you're dealing with in this book. And I think what Steven Erikson does so well in this book is he crafts a continent that feels so distinct from the other continent. Seven Cities feels so alien and foreign to Genebacus that you read in the first book. So a lot of people talked about having trouble switching from a whole huge cast of characters on Genebacus and Gardens of the Moon, switching to Deadhouse Gate, new continent, new cast of characters mostly, and having a hard time switching over. I felt that a little bit on certain storylines. I'll explain which. But at the same time, I didn't feel the whiplash as much as I thought I would. Now, from what I've been told, Book 3 is going to go back and kind of be a sequel to Gardens. Then Book 4 is going to be more of a sequel to Deadhouse Gates and pick up on those storylines. So while I went into Book 2 thinking, I can't wait to get to Book 3 and find out what happens next for all the guys in Gardens, by the end of Book 2, I'm like, I can't wait to get to Book 4. And that's what a masterful writer does, right? They hook you in a different setting. So to go through the plot, I will just say that there's 4, maybe 5 distinct plots going on. You follow specific groups. You follow the group from Genebacus as they try to reach the Empress / get Apsalar / Sari home. You follow Heberic, Felison, and Bowden, who are characters who I'll talk about very shortly, where they come from. You follow their wanderings in the desert and Felison's rise to power. You follow Mappo and Icarium wandering in the desert on a quest. You really don't know much about them at first, so it's kind of a mystery. Their friendship is shrouded in darkness, and you're not really sure what's going on with them completely. You follow Coltaine, Duker, and the Chain of Dogs, these refugees making a journey through the desert. And eventually, you also follow Callum, the Red Blades, and some characters that Callum encounters, and this becomes more of a cross-continental adventure towards the end of the book. Although there's some other stuff that's similar as well, but there's just so much that happens. So basically, the book starts with a prologue of sorts, and the prologue is absolutely just immediately sets the stage for being a bloodbath. It's brutal. So we start with Lysine. The Empress has ordered that some of the nobility is to be culled to keep her power. She's putting people who are maybe not completely loyal, doing away with them, and sending them overseas to 7 cities to the Atatarol mines. Now, Atatarol, we know what this is. It's something that kind of quells magic, subdues magic, and we know this because one of the adjuncts, Adjunct Lorne, I think her name was. It's already hard to remember. Shoot. Adjunct Lorne from Gardens of the Moon had an Atatarol sword. And so the start of this book is about people who the Empress thinks are maybe not completely loyal to her are being sentenced to go and serve in the Atatarol mines. And the survivability rate is going to be very low for these people. Among them is Felicin, who is the sister to Ganos Perrin of House Perrin. So I guess she's Felicin Perrin, but I just think of her as Perrin's sister. So Perrin, who I'd argue is the main protagonist of Gardens of the Moon, his sister is among those who's being sentenced to go over there. As she's in the line, chained together, being beaten by the angry people as they're sentenced to go and board a ship and leave, they're getting killed on their march, on the long, shameful march to be taken overseas on a ship to the mines. And so she immediately kind of survivability kicks in. She's like, I've got to survive. So there's a thug, a street thug, a criminal named Bowden, who there's more to him than meets the eye that we'll find out later on. So she sticks close to him and to Heberic Lighttouch, who is a former priest for a god named Fenner, and who abandoned Fenner because he found Fenner's teachings unfaithful, and so he kind of turned his back on the ways. And so this priest, he is a mangled guy, covered in tattoos, covered in flies, just kind of gross. And so they are taken swiftly away to the Atatarol mines, and Felicin immediately witnesses just a lot of gore and violence as they're taken away. And it's also mentioned that Perrin's other sister, both Felicin and Tavor, appeared briefly in Gardens of the Moon. It's mentioned that Tavor has found favor with Empress Lysine and is an adjunct, and Tavor turns a blind eye and is there and watches as her sister stuff is thrown on her, and she climbs through the mud and the death and the blood as she's boarded onto the ship and sent away. And Tavor turns a blind eye to her and does not show grace to her sister. Felicin immediately feels that she needs revenge against Tavor. And so that's the prologue. The prologue is incredibly well written and immediately sunk its hooks into me and made me want to know, where is this going to go? Wow, that was brutal. What did I just read? That was insanity. What's going to happen next? So they've been shipped over to Skullcap, where the Atatarol mines are, which is on the northern top bit of 7 cities. The next thing that happens is we're introduced to a Jagged, which is a species that's tusked, and a Trell, another species that's tusked. The Jaggeds are very magical beings of immense power. The Trell is a warrior. And the Trell's name is Mappo, and the Jagged's name is Icarium, or Icarium. These two guys are in a barren wasteland. It's called the something basin. I think it begins with an O. They're basically in the desert wandering around and looking for something. They're on a quest. And so that's all we really know at first, and they're just kind of wandering around. It's immediately apparent that they're very good friends, and Icarium has some kind of memory loss. He doesn't remember everything. And Mappo is helping him on this quest to find answers about his past. And as they're going around through the desert, they encounter things called Solatakans, which From what I understand, they're shapeshifters and can assume the form of various animals. They're beings of magic, and they encounter divers as well, which I think are also kind of shapeshifters, but they're also like, they're like big swarms. Like a swarm of divers would be like flies or rats or something like that. And then the Solitakans seem to be larger animals. I'm not for sure. I didn't know if I was completely understanding what those were and what they were about, but that's kind of what I understood them to be. And so they're basically wandering in the desert and encountering a lot of these people. And eventually they're able to go and make it to a place that in this desert called, what's it called? It's, to a temple. I don't remember if the temple had a name. I was checking my notes to see if I had a name for the temple, but they make it to a temple where there is a mischievous man named Iskarl who is a servant of Shadow, of Shadow Throne. He is a servant of the dark, of evil gods, and he is a madman, and he is weird, and he is maniacal. He is a servant who has a twist in their backstory, as we'll learn later. And so basically, Ikariam and Mappo and these two friends, as they're traveling through the wilderness, battling and killing shapeshifters that try to kill them, eventually in the wilderness, they come to this temple, and they're able to stay with Iskarl, and they feel that something about Iskarl is going to lead to Ikariam finding out about his past a little bit. And so whenever we cut to them throughout the first maybe 2-3 books of what Deadhouse Gates is divided into, they're basically just shuffling around his castle, just like looking for stuff. And I can't lie, I found it quite boring. I was immediately drawn to their friendship aspects and to Mappo as a character, but I found it kind of slow. Now, I'm sure it will be important later on, a lot of the world building that was set up there, but I couldn't help but feel a little like it was a little bit tedious, like it was a little hard to get through that portion of the book. And so then we also switch gears and we meet a cast of characters in 7 cities. We meet, and this is up in Hissar is where we start. And in Hissar, the High Fist, the old High Fist, has been replaced and has been taken down. And so Empress Lysine is sending a new High Fist because she is sensing that there is ruckus amongst the people there. And so she's sending a new High Fist to keep an eye on things. And the High Fist that she's sending is a Wiccan. Now, what are the Wiccans? Wiccans are tribes that live on Quantali, and they were taken over by the Empire after a long Wiccan war with them. But the Wiccans are now loyal to the Empire since being taken over, and they have their own customs that they've kind of been allowed to continue. The Wiccans reminded me of indigenous tribes, of Native American tribes. In some of their customs that they have, they're a very spiritual people, a very loyal to each other people. They have bonds with their horses, their stallions. They collect trophies. I think that's where some of the inspiration for these people come from. They're great warriors, great fighters, care deeply about each other, and they respect honor above all else. And so they're sending over Coltaine, the leader of the Wiccans, with his tribes to come over and hopefully be now as a High Fist, which is the High Fist that we know so far, Dujek One Arm, who's back in Genebacchus, he's an ex-High Fist because they've been excommunicated from the Empire after the whole debacle in Gardens of the Moon. But anyway, sorry, trying to keep on track here. Trying to keep this thought linear as opposed to the book, but trying to do the plot as best as I can. This is going to be a long video, I know. So Coltaine is now going to be the High Fist here that has been replaced. And so his entrance to Hissar in the north is witnessed by Malik Rel, who is a chubby, awful advisor type man, and he's an advisor to the other High Fist in 7 cities, and his name is Pormquil, and he's a skinny, weird man. And we're also told that there is a High Fist who has abandoned the Empire and has joined the local people and is gathering forces. And his name is Corbulo Dom. Or is it Camistrello? I think Camistrello is the mage, and I do think Corbulo Dom is the former High Fist who has joined the locals. Anyways, that's neither here nor there yet. That will be important later. And so the arrival of Coltaine and his people is greeted by the army. I think the 9th, or who's with the bridge burners over with Dujek One Arm. I think these are the 7th. Yes, these are the 7th. Are the names of the officers, or is the name of the army that's stationed in 7 cities, that's trying to keep the people orderly. And there's a lot of Malazans over there as well. And so the arrival of Coltaine is greeted by Pormquil, Malakrel, and Duker, who is the imperial historian. He was a historian, I believe, for Kellenved, and now he's who served as a soldier a long time ago and witnessed the Wiccan Wars. Maybe, I think he might have witnessed the first battles in 7 cities when they took over the continent. And now he's here to kind of catalog things. And he's with a mage who is a good friend of his, and the mage is named Culp. And Culp is like a Gandalf-looking guy with a long gray beard. And Culp is doing things for Duker, that Duker wants to be done. And so all of these moving pieces are starting. And while this is happening, why are they sending this high priest over? Why is Lysine putting him into place? Well, the people have this prophecy about something called the whirlwind, and it will come out of Raraku, which is like a holy desert. And the whirlwind is going to be when they triumph and take back what is theirs from the Malazans, and when they deal their death blows to the enemy. It's this prophesied thing, and there is a shaman in the desert who is a holy one whose name is Sha'ik. This is all kind of common knowledge. I think Duker's aware of it. There's a scene where he goes and speaks with the locals, and he tries to understand their customs and get to know them. And this is also known by the other plot line that starts, where from Genebacus, Crocus Younghand from Darujistan, Apsalar Sari, the girl who was captured from Quantali and who was possessed by Cotillion, and Callum Mecker and Fiddler, the Sapper, and Callum Mecker, who was the person from 7 cities who became a Claw, left the Claw, became a bridge burner. And so the 4 of them are making their way to 7 cities. And at first, Crocus is a bit annoyed. We start with them on a ship, and they quietly enter the city, and they're under a guise. They're pretending to be traders and gypsy-like people as they travel through the desert and the cities. And so a lot of the early stuff with them is them hopping from city to city. And Callum is seeing symbols everywhere, symbols of the whirlwind. So he knows that his people from long ago, their uprising is coming. He knows this is about to be a bloodbath. So does Fiddler. And Crocus is kind of annoyed at them at first, because he's like, why did we not just go from Genebacus to Quantali? We're trying to get Apsalar home. And it's eventually revealed to Crocus and to Sari that they went this way because Quick Ben wants them to go through a Deadhouse. An Azeth house. And the Azeth house is called Deadhouse, that they're trying to get to. And the Azeth house is like what was at the end of Gardens of the Moon that that guy went into, Ralik Nom, and that girl who was the head of, I don't even remember what it's called anymore, the people in Darujistan who were assassins. They disappeared into the thing that rose up from the ground at the end of Gardens of the Moon. And that was also an Azeth house. And so there's an Azeth house in the desert somewhere lost. And hopefully they can find it, because it will be a portal that takes them right into the heart of Quantali, so that maybe Callum can go and kill the Empress to make it easier for the bridge burners back home, who are now being outlawed by the Empire. So this could strike a blow to the Malazans and get this to be an empire that is respectable again. Because the Bridgeburners would like to be respected within the Malazan Empire. They'd like it to be a respectable empire again, one that they know, one that they're not outlawed from. So Callum's going to try to take this into his own hands and do just that. And maybe take out the Empress, and also they can drop off Sari back at her fishing village in Quantali while they're at it. So they're going to try to go through the Deadhouse, which seems to be a plan that was thought up by Quick Ben, and it's a dangerous plan because this continent is right on the edge of revolt. So this is not really the time to be passing through, as we'll find out very, very quickly. And so these are kind of the main plot threads that we're going to be dealing with as we go through. And so basically, as far as the plot threads go, at the start, I was not really vibing with Mappo and Icarium. I was vibing with what was going on with Felison, Baladin, and Heberic in the mines. Thought that was interesting. I did not find Icarium and Mappo as interesting. I did not find Duker as interesting when he's just going around learning about customs in 7 cities. And I found that the main story that I was invested in was the characters I already knew at the start, which makes sense that I'd feel more invested with the characters I already know. I was more invested with Crocus, Fiddler, Callum, and Absalar as they're trying to make their way through. Eventually, in one of their first stops, Fiddler meets with a holy man who he saves the child from being trampled by something called a red blade. Red blades aren't going to be an important part going forward because red blades are basically a group of warriors who are made up of 7 cities locals, but they're incredibly loyal to the Empire. So they're basically local people from the 7 cities continent, from the tribes who have sworn allegiance to the Malazan Empire. So the red blades are going to be kind of important characters going forward. When there's red blades, you know that they're powerful. They're kind of no-nonsense, and they're super, super loyal. And one almost tramples a kid in one of the cities, and Fiddler intervenes and saves him, and the local has some magic and tells him some stuff that's going to help him for later on. Tells Callum this, and meanwhile, Callum meets with a local informant who owes him a favor, and it turns out the local informant has a special book. This book is a plot MacGuffin, and the book is something that Shaik needs to awaken the whirlwind apocalypse out of Raraku so that they can overthrow the Malazans. And so Callum's like, all right, this can cause some chaos. This can cause a distraction. So maybe I will go and do that and then unstabilize the Malazans here and then go kill Lysine. And then maybe we can get this Malazan Empire back on track the way it used to be. That's kind of what Callum's mind state is at this point. And so this is a convenient way for Callum to separate from Fiddler, Crocus, and Absalar. So the 3 of them are going to go and try to find Deadhouse and get to Quantali. Callum's going to try to meet him there, but he's going to go via the desert. He's going to wander in the desert, find the holy lady out in the desert, Shaik, give her the book, start the whirlwind, trek across the desert, board a ship, get to Quantali, and hopefully they can meet up. And so Callum does indeed find Shaik out in the middle of the desert, and he awakens the whirlwind by giving her the book. Now, Shaik blesses him with a thing, a creature, a demon. It's named Apt or something like that. And Shaik has some loyal followers. There's a Tablakai, which is basically a troll guy. He's a big old guy. And then also Leoman, who's a shaman, I think, is what he is. And Leoman's going to be an important character going forward. So Callum meets with them. Shaik gives him Apt to watch over him. And Callum continues on. The book is opened by Shaik. The apocalypse has started. But what Callum didn't know is that this girl, who's a red blade, had been tracking them. And whew, she kills Shaik. Shaik, who's supposed to be reborn, who's supposed to be this powerful figurehead, this woman who's ancient and has lived in the desert and has been biding her time, waiting to start an apocalypse to overthrow the Malazans, is quickly taken out by a red blade with a crossbow. Oh, so I guess not a bow and arrow, but more like pew. And so she is immediately killed, which kind of surprised me at the time. But Shaik is killed, and so the Leoman and Tablakai are basically going to stay there for what feels like an eternity. By the time we encountered them again, I was like, these are new characters. And then I was like, oh, wait, I think I remember them from 700 pages ago. So basically, they're going to stay dormant in the desert, mourning the loss of Shaik, and waiting for what's going to happen next. The Red Blades are going to continue trailing Callum, because Callum's an outlaw. He's a bridge burner, and the bridge burners are now outlawed. So, is he trying to kill the Empress? Let's follow and find out. And I cannot remember the name of the Red Blade. She is probably my least favorite character point of view of all time. They come to a tavern, and Callum speaks with them and moves on. The Red Blades go in there and basically kill everyone because they can leave no witnesses. They take their job seriously, and they're kind of just annoying. Let me find out what her name even was. Her name was Lostera Yill was her name. And she was joined by some other Red Blades as well. Aralt, Arpat, and Tene Baralta at first. And then there's some other Red Blades, the Cetrals, who met with Duker, and they hated that the Wiccans were coming over and felt like the Wiccans were going to be a bad thing, and so they gave them a hard time. We will see those two way later on. And so basically the apocalypse has started, and it's brutal. But backtracking a little bit, we go up to Skullcap in the mines where Felison, Heberic, and Bodden are trying to survive. And it is kind of uncomfortable and not very fun at all. There's a captain of the Malazans up there, and he is not a very nice guy, and he has an advisor named Benneth, who's also not a very nice guy, and they do not very nice things to Felison, and Felison feels she has to do some not very nice things just so that they can stay alive, and it's not very fun to read, but it's kind of integral to Felison's whole character arc. Basically, she feels that she has to use herself as currency to stay alive, and this is at first very hollow to her, and eventually it kind of fills her with purpose and meaning. She feels she needs this to have value, which is a very unfortunate character arc that was a bit hard to read at times. But I feel like Felison's a character who's written brilliantly, if not tragically, very tragically. Because it's just an interesting character arc that she goes down, very tragic, very hard to read, but you very much empathize with her at first, and then somehow he takes a character who's been abused, who you care like so much for and feel so bad for, and then he twists that character to show how this has broken that character, and she lashes out at everyone around her, and you start to not like the character again. But yet you understand, but yet you don't like her because she's a jerk, but yet you empathize because some horrible stuff happened to her. But so it's very interesting, very nuanced. And so basically Heberic begins to think less of this noble who's just basically using herself to try to keep them alive, get them extra food, get them in places where they won't die. But meanwhile, Duker was friends with Heberic, so he has sent Culp to arrange that Heberic get out safely from the mines where he's been doomed to die. Because Duker admired Heberic's work. I believe Heberic had some literature, and so Duker had met him once, and he wants him saved. So Duker sends Culp, the mage, to go and to rescue Heberic. And so he does this right when the whirlwind starts. So immediately all the natives have risen up in their tribes, and they are slaughtering people left and right. So in the midst of the chaos, Heberic and Culp part ways, and Culp goes with a naval group in a ship, and these are naval marines, but these are no ordinary marines. These are very powerful marines. Their names are Jessler is the corporal. He's in charge of the ship. I don't know if he's a corporal or a captain. I can't remember. I think he's a corporal. And Stormy is his kind of second-in-command guy. And then they've got a young guy named Truth. Truth reminded me a lot of how Crocus was in Book 1. He's the young guy who's kind of optimistic about the world. And the three of them are followers of Thaner, which is what Heberic used to be a priest of. And these are also men who fought for Kellenved in campaigns and fought with, I can't remember, but it was a very respected high fist. So these are very respected men from very respected campaigns. These are tough fighters. So the three of them and Culp the mage, who's looking like Gandalf, are going off to try to rescue Heberic. But anyways, up in Skullcap, the revolt happens too. The whirlwind doesn't just occur in Hissar, which is where Culp and Duker split up. but it additionally happens in Skullcap as well. And so the people are being slaughtered. Benneth dies, thank goodness. And Bauden, Felison, and Heberic swim and make it out. But in the process, there's this awful scene where they're ravaged by blood flies, and it's just grotesque. They're clawing at their face. They leave permanent scars and marks. So Felison is feeling like even her beauty is now gone. Basically, what Steven Erikson does is he slowly strips away all the dignity of this noble-born character, strips it away, deconstructs it until there's nothing left, until there's just hollow. And then she's replacing that hollow with multiple things to try to find meaning. And it's just a broken character. He just shows us the process of this character being broken. And as people are trying to, especially Heberic, bring her back. So basically a lot of the book then is them wandering around in the desert. And I was invested in the desert part where they're just wandering around in the desert for a while. It gets old eventually, but it's a brutal slog. He doesn't like say, oh, and then they wandered around. You spend chapters suffering with them. They've made it out. They have very little food left, and they're just slogging through the desert. There was a contact at the Otateral mines in Skullcap who was a contact of Culp, and he's like, Culp is coming, go meet him. And so they're like, shoot, we're going to try our best, but they don't know if they'll even survive. They don't know if they'll make the rendezvous on time. So they're just in the desert hoping. And they keep wishing they were dead. They keep running out of water. They argue, they bicker, they almost kill each other. Philosophical stuff goes down. Heberic gets touched with power when he touches an ancient pillar thing. Lots of stuff is going down here. He's not just saying oh, and they trekked along the desert and it was tough, it was rough, it was suffering. He makes you feel it. He lets you stay in those chapters and just feel the pressure, the constraints. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm dying. And it is a slog to get through as they're just trying to make it. Eventually, Culp does get there. He reaches them in his vessel, in his ship, and he's joined with the Marines. And in the process, there's a giant sorcery battle that's going on as Otateral, which is a dampener on magic, is fighting with a crazed lunatic who was a sorcerer, and I don't think his name's revealed, but they're fighting back and forth, and so their ship, as it's departing, gets caught in a lightning storm and transported to another dimension. Not another dimension, but a warren, which is kind of a alternate place. I think of it like the Upside Down from Stranger Things. It's another place where magic flourishes and the gods can access, and only some mortals can walk in these warrens, typically magic users. I don't really understand warrens. I don't think we're supposed to. It feels all magic-y and way above our level of comprehension, which makes it a place that you kind of feel in awe of. And so they're just in this place, and they're all pretty scared as they're in this place. It's also been revealed that Bauden is a member of the Talon. Lysine, her secret warriors are called the Claw. But before Lysine, there was Dancer and Kellenved, and Emperor Kellenved's right-hand man was Dancer, and Dancer's warriors were called the Talon instead of the Claw. So it's revealed that Bauden was sent by Tavor to watch over Felison, and so he's been secretly keeping her alive as her personal bodyguard. She's not really happy to learn of this information, and she doesn't really like Bauden, and constantly is just saying, I want to kill my sister, I want to get revenge, I hate her. And Bauden the whole time is just there, a paid bodyguard from Tavor to protect Tavor's sister, and so he kind of is trying to defend her. Heboric's being all philosophical, and as they're trying to figure out a way to get out of the warren that they're now stuck in, they get separated from the Marines. So you think Jessler, Stormy, and Truth are dead, which was very unfortunate because I really came to like those Marines. They're quite funny characters. They're basically remind me of bridge burners. They have that soldier vibe, great chemistry between them, fun to read, awesome. So I was like, oh shoot, they died, oh no. And I was actually kind of concerned. They'll show up way later on. So as they depart the warren, those three get separated. Culp, Bauden, Felison, and Heberic are now walking through the desert, lost. They are just grateful to be alive. You really feel that they're making it through by the by the skin of their teeth, I think is the phrase. Anyways, I'm too tired and too animated for remembering my phrases right now. My popular catchphrases and quotes, and stuff. I'm exhausted trying to keep track of all these plot points, but I just love it. So try not to get too lost in the plot as I recount it from memory. Then, meanwhile, the whirlwind is happening, and the whirlwind is absolutely brutal. There's depictions of horrible stuff. I feel like I have PTSD just from reading it. There's depictions of the locals taking children and doing terrible stuff to the children before killing them in the streets, and lots of really bad stuff of pillaging and burning down villages and slaughtering people. And Dukur is behind because while he and Culp were trying to figure out a way to go rescue Heberic before they separated, Hissar was hit and it's burned down, and so now Dukur is weeks behind. Oh shoot, what's his name? No, I wanted to say Cotillion, but I know it's not Cotillion. It's the Wiccan. Where is his name? Coltaine. Thank you. Not Cotillion. Coltaine. Coltaine and his bunch of Wiccans, which includes Bolt, who is his uncle and who was training with Dukur earlier. It includes, so I'll just go over who's there. There's Coltaine, who's leading all these refugees from Hissar, and they're collecting anyone on their way that they can find who's still alive. And so he's in charge of this group. And his right-hand man is his uncle, Bolt, he's a great character. He's a veteran of so many wars. He's got a great sense of humor and a scar. And he's super awesome. Bolt's really funny. You gotta love him. Then there's the captain of the 7th is named Lull. He's a great guy, very philosophical. You gotta love him. You gotta love Lull. He's really great. The head mage of the Wiccans is named Sorno Enith. Then they have some young Wiccan mages named who were siblings who look like children, but they're actually adults. Their names are Neither and Nil. Then you have some other captains. Let me find their exact names. I can't recall them off the top of my head. Look in the Dramatis Personae real quick. It's Chenid and Solmar are both captains in the 7th, alongside Lull, and they're there as well. And then, of course, there is Corporal List, who was a man who, when the whirlwind hadn't started yet, they did like simulated training fights, and he kept dying over and over again. He is not a seasoned guy. He is a green, fresh cadet. And so you think he's gonna die really quick. And so he's there as well. And they're hoarding these refugees. Included in the refugees is some really rich ones who are in their caravans, and they've got their pomp about them. They think they're super important. And one of them is named Nethpera. And so they are traveling from Hissar all the way down to Aren, which is a port city that goes to Quantali. And it's there at Aren that the other High Fist Pormquil is waiting, alongside a captain named, begins with a B. He's down there as well. His name is, let me see here, Blistig. He's a commander down at Aren under Pormquil. And they can get back to Quantali, where the Malazans are, and the Malazans might be sending reinforcements to Aren. So basically, in the north, Hissar is way far away from Aren. They have to travel like this all along the coastline to try to get down there. And so they are defending themselves from hundreds of thousands. They are outnumbered by the 7 cities locals. All these tribes, they all have names. Can't remember them all off the top of my head, but they all have their interests and quirks. What's so cool about Steven Erikson is he does make them all feel differently. They all approach things differently. They all fight differently. And they are led by Camist Relo, who is a mage, and he is a dangerous guy. And he is leading the 7 cities' forces and tribes in trying to kill Coltaine's group of refugees with all those people I mentioned. And they're just trying to get from Hissar to Aren. A few days away is Duker, who's trying to catch up. And it's sickening what Duker sees, what he witnesses. Duker sees awful stuff as he is trying to get his way back. He's trying to catch up on horseback. He's amongst so many enemies as he's just trying to catch back up to the forces. He's seeing the aftermath of battles, so many bodies, so many people. And he's marveling that Coltaine is still alive because the attack came out of nowhere. As soon as that book had been delivered, boom, chaos breaks loose. Meanwhile, also traveling through is Crocus, Apsalar, and Fiddler, and they're finding the aftermath of this. They are still disguising themselves as local kind of gypsies and people who just move through the towns, and they're trying to make it through and encountering horrible stuff as well. They go through a burned down town, and it's such a stark scene that stays in my mind as they see the aftermath and the carnage and the brutality of the people that have risen up. And that's what really turned me against the Seven City locals. No sympathy for them in the end. I was just rooting for all the Malazans to kick their butts because they are brutal in their tactics. You end up just rooting for anyone who's not them. And so Fiddler and Apsalar and Crocus make their way into the desert, and they're trying to find Deadhouse as they're making their way through, and the sandstorm, the whirlwind that rises out of the Raraku, is threatening them. Eventually, they're able to make it to where Iskarl Pust lives and meet up with Mappo and Icarium. Mappo and Fiddler immediately kind of become friends. They're kind of kindred spirits, fighting a lot of battles from a lot of wars, and it's then that they recognize Mappo and Icarium. Now, who are Mappo and Icarium? They were actually... They were actually briefly mentioned in Gardens of the Moon. There was something that was left behind by Icarium, who had fashioned some kind of clock that was in Darujistan that Baruch respected, and he pointed it out to Animander Rake. And so I remember seeing those names before for Icarium and his Trell companion Mappo. So they were mentioned in Gardens, and now we see them here. And obviously they're an important duo in universe, known by their reputation far and wide as powerful beings, beings that have a tragic past, perhaps, and Fiddler becomes quite good friends quickly with Mappo, and all of them don't trust Iskarl Pust. Immediately, Crocus absolutely hates Iskarl Pust, and it's revealed, a big twist is that the servant of Iskarl Pust is the kidnapped father of Apsalar. But then, eventually, Apsalar and her father both disappear. It's found out that Iskarl Pust has instructed the father to lead Apsalar into the desert for his purposes, to try to serve Shadow Throne. So they've gone out into the desert, and so now Crocus, who's quite smitten with Apsalar, as we know from the last book, is like, we got to get back to her. So Fiddler, Crocus, Mappo, and Icarium are like, let's go get them, and we'll take Iskarl Pust with us because we don't trust him. So they're going to try to find Sari and to try to find her father, whose name is Relic, I think, which sounded like Ralik Nom and Melik Rel. So there's a lot of Ix and Wix and John Wick's in there too, blasting people. No, so yeah, they're trying to get them back. Meanwhile, Culp and Bodden and Heberic and Felison. Felison has kind of broken it off with Bodden and made him go a separate way, so Bodden's disappeared. And so they have found like an ancient city, an ancient civilization that once existed, and they're hiding out there for a little while, getting all philosophical. Heberic's finding out that despite blind with no hands, he has some powers again, and he has like phantom hands and can do stuff. So as they're traveling through, they encounter a man who manages to lure them to him, and he immediately devours Culp. It happens out of nowhere. I was absolutely shocked because at this point in the book, two of my favorite characters were Culp and Bodden. I really enjoyed them. Culp is just a great guy. He's trying hard. He's not the most powerful mage, but he's given it his all. He's like a Radagast Gandalf type character who I kind of really liked him. He's a little eccentric at times, a little over the top, but he's just really fun. I liked him. And he gets devoured, killed so fast by a random, I don't know if it's a Sol attacking or a diver, but a shapeshifter, I think it's a diver, in the desert who just preys upon them. And Felison and Heberic are going to be killed next, but Bodden comes back out of nowhere because he's the bodyguard, and he kills the diver, but he burns himself down in the process. He fights with fire. So his last stand is something that ingrained into my mind. It's a good part about midway through the book. And so Felison is absolutely broken over this because this bodyguard has given his life for her, someone that she sent away. And so she's her degraded person is mourning him. And Heberic, who's kind of a pure guy, but kind of a messed up guy, is also mourning Bodden. No one mourned Culp for very long, but I did. I was like, oh man, there goes Culp. And so, yeah, so they're now traveling through the desert, just a pair again. So it's back to just Heberic and Felison. They're traveling through the desert. Meanwhile, what happens that becomes the main draw for the book for me, I began to not care about anything else but this. Duker meets up with Coltaine's group, and it becomes known as the Chain of Dogs. This group of refugees, huge group of refugees, like 10,000 or something like that. So few defenders. What's left of the 7th? What's left of the Wiccan clans? 2 red blades and some staff and some sappers. They're all trying to defend these people from hundreds of thousands of tribes. From just hundreds of, just thousands of warriors coming out of the deserts, coming out of the hills, attacking them from behind, from the sides, everywhere. They're just following like ravenous hyenas as they travel all the way down. And you're with them every step of the way. I think it gets the most page time, and it is absolutely, by far, the best part of the book and the best part of the series so far. The Chain of Dogs became what I cared about. It is the section at Raraku was okay. The stuff at Whirlwind was okay. The stuff with the Marines and Culp and all of them in the alternate Warren, that was cool. But all of it paled in comparison to this. And Duker's philosophical nature immediately became my favorite part of the book. He's there to witness this. And so he's making mental notes of all that he sees. And he started out as a somewhat optimistic old guy, and he is, by the end of this, he is just in agony. He is just a drained person for what he sees. He sees people left behind because they're too slow to keep up. He's there for every battle, and he's kind of doing a character study on the people he sees around him. So he is assigned Corporal List, and the two of them basically go around the camps at night and ride around with them in the day and meet with the senior officers at night so that he can keep a list of what happened there that day. Their plan is basically cross 3 rivers, survive, and make it down to Aren. And so each of the rivers is a battle. And I kid you not, it's probably one of the best battles I've ever read in all of fiction. The battles at each of the crossings have names that I can't recall off the top of my head. But each crossing, the battles just get better and better and better and more intense. You're on the edge of your seat. They are so intense. The Chain of Dogs, I can't even communicate it well enough. How epic, how grueling, how brutal, how awful, how entertaining, how engaging, how intriguing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It is by far one of my favorite things I've ever read. It is brutal. It is a portrait of war. It's a portrait of humanity. It's a portrait of characters, of leaders as they break under pressure and as they do the impossible through sheer will, through sheer strategy. Coltaine's a brilliant strategist. It's just insane to read. It truly is. As they're trying to survive with all of the odds against them. The odds are stacked against them. And so as Duker's witnessing all of this, the philosophical nature of what he says is just so good. It is so deep. It is so nuanced. It is so dark and brutal. It is war. What we see there, and the trenches of the chain of dogs is it's a constantly moving caravan with a huge target on its back that everyone's taking pot shots at through a 30,000 league journey or something like that. It's unbelievable, and it's by far the best thing of this book. Everything else, every other plot line, there's some cool stuff in here. None of it is as good as the Chain of Dogs, and yet the Chain of Dogs is agonizing to read at the same time. So many mixed emotions. We lose the Red Blades, who were rude to Duker earlier, and they fight till the end and earn even Coltaine's respect by the end. And you really feel a closeness with all of the officers. I really liked Chenid. I really liked Lull. I really liked List. I liked Duker, who's probably my favorite character in all of the books at this point in time. Coltaine is just a brilliant person who you can't help but admire. I like Bolt. I like List, Chenid. They're just all great. And as they're going along, all of the noble-born like Nethpra are complaining about their conditions every step of the way, complaining about what they have to eat, what they have to give up. They have these awesome cattle dogs as well that are absolutely vicious and wreak havoc. They are carnage creators. They are vicious dogs that are cattle dogs that were owned by the Wiccans, and they are brutal, and they sick them on the natives, and they're awesome. But there's one bit that stuck in my mind where there's a little lap dog, a rat dog that was one of the nobles' little lap pet, and it gets carried off by the cattle dogs, looking terrified, and you're like, oh shoot. You think that's just a little detail that Duker recorded, because he takes note of all the little things. He's tracking all the little details, all the little notations as he's going along. And, yeah. And so, as it's all happening, you find that, well, it's just so fascinating, but eventually that little rat dog that gets carried off becomes like the leader of the cattle dogs, which is a very funny detail. And Bolt keeps trying to kill it because it's a little yappy little, it's like a little chihuahua it's like a little chihuahua has become the alpha of a group of Dobermans and is commanding them. So all the people hate it. So there's some levity, some comedy as they're going along. They eventually reach a forest. Meanwhile, Callum has been traveling all this entire time out in front of the chain of dogs behind him, and he comes across with Apt, that creature trailing him, and unbeknownst to him, that Red Blade girl is still training him, and she's joined by a claw named Pearl, who's a servant of Topper, who we met in the first book, and Pearl is trying to kill Callum. So Pearl's going along, and Gil, if that was her name, is going along, trying to kill Callum. And as Callum's going along, he encounters a family who have survived. And the captain is named Captain Kenib, and he has a wife and 2 sons, and then his wife's sister, so his sister-in-law. His sister-in-law is named, it begins with an M. It's Melinda or something like that, Manala. And so Callum takes pity on them because people are trying to go and do horrible things to them and kill them. That he encounters some horrible natives who are going to do some terrible stuff. Some Seven Cities natives are going to do some terrible stuff to those refugees. And so basically Callum takes them under his wing, goes into a warren that's going to try to take them all the way to Aren down in the south. And so he's now slowed down, but he's doing what he thinks is right. As they're going along, he's taking charge, and Manala is also a very strong personality, so she ends up clashing with him a lot, but she begins to very much admire and start to love Callum as they're going along on this journey. And so they're still being tailed, and eventually Apt, who has been guarding Callum at a distance, comes across a place where there's a boy who's had his eyes pecked out, which is absolutely brutal. There's a Malazan boy who's been chained to something down and nailed to something, left to die. His eyes have been taken, and he's all brutalized, and the creature Apt kind of takes pity on him, and he's a servant of Shadowthrone, and he kind of revives the boy, so the boy goes with Apt and kind of sits on his shoulder and goes along, and they're protecting Callum from a distance, And Pearl and the Red Blade girl also sense that something's out there, something dangerous, as they're tailing Callum as well on the way to Aren. And as all of these plots are happening, so by this point in the book, you have the Chain of Dogs that's going down. You have Felison and Heberic, who are in the desert walking around. You have Shaik and Shaik's body and her 2 protectors in the desert. You have Apsalar and her father going that way too. So you're like, the entire time I was like, oh shoot, Apsalar is going to become the reborn Shaik. I was like, oh no, this isn't good. That's exactly what Steven Erikson wanted you to think. And she's being tailed, of course, by Mappo Icarium, Iskrull, Pus, and Crocus. And the Chain of Dogs is moving along with Dukar, and Callum's moving along with Manala and Captain Keneb's family. Does that sound like a lot? It's definitely a lot. So eventually, after a bunch of insanely gripping battles that the Chain of Dogs is going through, they get to a forest, and it's here at the forest that they encounter Truth, Jessler, and Stormy, who were the Marines who were in the Warren, and they meet with Dukar, and they say that they knew Heberic and Culp, and that they got separated for them. So Dukar befriends them, and they begin to really respect each other. Dukar notices that the Marines have become powered. They've gotten powers. They're like almost glowing and radiating powers from their time in the Warren. And so there's a funny scene where Coltaine encounters them, and he punches one of them in the face. It breaks his hand because they're like mouthing off to them. They're just being typical Marines, running their mouths, against their superior officers. And so it's a very amusing scene. I was laughing out loud with all the jokes flying, and so there's respect shared between them. And so basically, they have this boat that they'd found in the Warren that's powered by dead Tisty Edger. I kind of gloss over that, but there's so much information here. Which are like the Tisty Andy, but rarer, and they found it in the Warren, and they're confused by it. Also, when they were in the Warren, Culp noticed that, when he was still alive, noticed that all these maps were there for other continents. Ooh, that's very interesting. So what the world they thought they knew is perhaps not the entirety of the world that actually exists. So they have this magic ship that's rowed by a bunch of dead guys. And so basically Coltaine's like, take as many refugees as you can, go to Aren, and they're like, we want to stay and fight, and they're like, no, go. And so the 3 Marines load up with as many refugees as they can take, and they go away. And it's here that Camus Relo has caught up with them, and it's here at this battle that Sorno Enith sacrifices himself so that all of the other people can get through, and the reason he has to is Coltaine's plan is working so great right now at this point. They've conquered every battle, they've excelled and gotten through with flying colors, but then Nethpura and the nobles are worried, and so they contact Camus Relo to strike a deal to try to book safe passage to Aren, and it completely backfires, as you know it would, because these people are stupid and should just listen to Coltaine. And so Nethpura's been causing problems, and they lose their highest mage as a result. And so Sorno Enith is the biggest, I think, first casualty, the first major one of the people as they're going through. So they make it through this forest. There's such a somber scene in this place. The butterflies, it's beautiful, it's peaceful, it's tranquil. The butterflies in the forest, a stark contrast to the desert all around them. But then it's back in the desert, and the march is even more grueling than before, as they're slogging their way, trying everything they can to get to Aren. And it's at this point that some of the guys like Captain Solmar and Captain Chenid aren't mentioned again, so you can assume that they fell in battle here, characters that I really quite enjoyed. And so, yeah, they're continuing along, and there's one point that I remembered that was a philosophical discussion between Captain Lowell and Dukar. And basically, Lowell says something to the effect of, he says something like, children are dying. And Dukar says, all of humanity's flaws summed up in that one simple phrase, children are dying. And he's like, it's a highlight of everything that's wrong in society. And so they're just contemplating a lot of stuff, and it's so good. It's just it's so good. Everything about it is just brilliant. It's so good. Meanwhile, Callum his troop have gotten into Aren, and they leave behind Kenib and his wife, and so Callum basically tries to leave them in Aren, and he's like, if you can, get out. It's going to be a bloodbath here. Nothing, Coltaine can slow him down. Nothing's going to stop the forces out there. This continent is lost. The Malazans are going to try to take it back, but this is a bloodbath. This is a lost fight. Get out. So he's like, you guys should try to leave. And then he himself leaves them, now safely in Aren, and gets on a ship and is going away. Unbeknownst to him, Pearl has killed the Red Blade girl who's been tailing him the whole time, and has likewise gotten on the ship and has met him as a contact of the guy who gave him the book that he gave to Shaik. If that doesn't make sense to you, read the book. And so he's there under a fake name. I can't even remember what the name is. It's he goes by begins with an S. Let's see. Salk Elin. He goes by the name Salk Elin as he's going along. So basically, he and Salk Elin are going along, but unbeknownst to Callum, Manala has followed him and has also boarded a ship because she's trying to get there for love. So she's in a ship behind him as his ship is going along, and he's got all of Pormcoil's treasures and is on the ship that he's boarded and is taking back to Quantali. So it's showing that Pormcoil could be out there trying to fight, trying to get to Coltaine, and alas, he is just more worried about treasures. He is an awful guy. And he and Malacrel are in there, and Blistig can do nothing. He wants to do something. The commander who's in there, he wants to do something, but the High Fist is not letting it happen. They're just sending all their money and their valuables back to Quantali instead of actually going out and helping the Chain of Dogs. So it becomes pretty apparent that things are not going to go well. They've fought for so long, but it's only so long that they can keep going. And Camus Rello is still closing in, and Corbolo Dom, the ex-High Fist, is sweeping in as well. And so basically, Coltaine gathers all that's left of the Sappers, the Wicked Dog tribe, the Wiccans, and the 7th, what's left of his army. And he says, we will stay and fight. Duker, you and Neither and Nil, the young Wiccans that look like children, but they're actually adults, and several other young Wiccans, you go and deliver the refugees to Aren. Take them the rest of the way. So they stay back to fight. And so it's very somber because Duker's like, I'm leaving all of you to die, is what he feels like. And so Coltaine's like, no, you're a soldier, Duker. He's the old man historian, and he's like, no, you're my soldier. Go. You got this. And so that is what happens as he's taking them all the way, all the rest of the way after they've traveled so long. And so you're like, man, they're all left there, and they're going to make a last stand. And so we get to the point where Duker gets all of the people in, and so all the refugees, finally, they open the gate, and the refugees pile in, and Duker and Neither and Nil and a couple of Wiccans make it in there as well. And so they're like, we know what's coming. It's going to be brutal when Corbolo Dom and Camus Rello get here. We're going to need reinforcements, and it's known that reinforcements are coming in the way of that the adjunct Tavor, Fellas and Sisters, coming over to put a stop to the uprising, to the revolt. And so she's coming with a legion overseas. So this is known because as she's coming over, Callum is on his way to assassinate the Empress, with Manala trailing him. Meanwhile, Fiddler and Crocus and Icarium and Mappo catch up to Apsalar and her father, and it's revealed that Relic was put up to try to get Apsalar to go and become the new Shaik, which was a plan hatched by Iskril Pust, and so it was a delay of time, so it was pointless they're wandering there. So where the actual entrance to the Deadhouse is back near where Iskril Pust was, and so they make it to the foot of the Deadhouse, and they meet with Shadowthrone in a warren, and Shadowthrone gifts them his hounds, and so they're making use of the hounds, and so the hounds are there with them, and they're trying to make it through the Azinth house and get to the Deadhouse. And it's revealed that Then Mappo has a very tearful discussion with Icarium where he's like, basically, Icarium, you're super powerful and you murdered and wiped out tons of people. You are a super dangerous power, and the Azenth want to imprison you here so that you can't hurt anybody. But I chose my friendship with you over imprisoning you for eternity and dooming you to eternal death and suffering. Because even though you kill people, you're my friend and I care about you, and it's like real hitch in the heart stuff. And so basically they're in a place that wants to imprison Icarium because he's super powerful, and if Icarium feels danger and he lets loose, it's going to be like a nuclear event because Icarium's going to kill everyone in the vicinity. He's like a ticking time bomb. And so they're like treading super lightly as they're trying to make their way through the Deadhouse. And eventually they are going to make it to the Deadhouse, which is going to teleport them to Quantali. Meanwhile, after running with some pirates that were used to try to steal all the treasure, and Callum is able to swiftly get them off his back with the help of Selk Elam, who he doesn't know is a claw named Pearl at this time. They're able to get rid of those pirates. That was an interesting scene, very interesting stuff, but I kind of have to move through it as I'm trying to get through this plot. It's very dense. And they finally get to Quantali, but not to Quantali, the mainland, because of the pirate trying to take their treasure. It better suits Callum's needs, and so they're able to go to Malaz Isle, where the Malazan city is. I think it's called Malaz City. It's on Malaz Isle. It's a little island. It's like Great Britain off of Europe. It's a little isle off of Quantali. So they're getting there. And meanwhile, the heaviest part of the book is by far this point. It's absolutely rough and absolutely brutal. But before I get to it, basically, as Felison and Heberic are wandering, they come across Shaik's Leomin and the Tablakai. Remember, I said they'd come back into it later. And basically, Felison is given the mantle of the Shaik Reborn. So she performs the ritual, and so it's kind of like, did Shaik possess her, or has she choosing this for herself? She's like, I am this person. And so she's convinced herself, I'm a broken person, nothing's left. I am reborn. There's nothing left of me. I'm a shell of what I was from all of the tragedy that I've endured and experienced. So I'm going to remake myself as the Shaik Reborn. And so immediately the Leomin is basically becomes her right-hand man. Heberic's her right-hand man, and the Tablakai as well. And she gets 3 mages who are out in the desert. And so she performs some kind of miraculous events where she says stuff to them that she should not know to show that she has the powers of Shaik. So she's now very powerful. Felison went from this scared little girl to being immensely powerful and dangerous, seeking revenge against Tavor. So she is now leading the 7 cities people against the Malazans and against her sister. So she's coalescing all this power and going to join Corbeladom and Camus Rillo. Now the heaviest part. Duker, who has spent all this time, and I feel like I've breezed by it. This book spends so much time on the Chain of Dogs, taking you literally every step of the way. You know these characters. You enjoy these characters. I came to think of their nightly meetings as they're strategizing for how to survive the next day. It felt so like horrible situation that they're in, but it's felt so fun. This brotherhood that they have. It's infectious. It's grueling, but it's amazing to read. And I just love the whole vibe of it. It was brutal, yes, of course, but it just seeing Coltaine do the impossible over and over again was amazing. And seeing how much his people respected him, the mutual respect shared is just so inspiring. And so Duker's up in Aren safely, and they see in a distance that the reason why the forces were slowed is because indeed Coltaine's people are given all they have to fighting to the last against Camus Rillo and Corporal Ladam. And so they get right to the foot of the city walls of Aren, and Pormquil and Malacrel, the advisor to the High Fist, and the High Fist himself, Pormquil, are too scared to open the gate. So standing on the top are all these soldiers who have heard the tales of Coltaine, his nobleness, his leadership, how he's fought till the end and done the impossible. They all respect him so much. They revere him. They idolize him. He is a legend. For all of them are legends for what they've done in coming all this way, for surviving all these months of grueling battle, constant battle for months, with very little resources, with all the odds stacked against them. They are revered, they are legendary, they are honored. And they all stand on the top of the wall and watch as the last of them are slowly slaughtered. So you see Bolt go down, the uncle of Coltaine goes down, and Corporal List, who was the friend, the optimistic young, and eventually we see him become a seasoned warrior by the end. He gets his head lopped off finally, and he's one of the lucky ones. And so Duker's watching as his friends are slaughtered one last time at the foot of the city because they would not open the gates. And lastly, Coltaine, who the local Seven Cities people know that Coltaine's people revere crows. The Wiccans revere crows. So it's the legend is that crows will come and receive his soul and transform him and ascend him. And that's known what's going to be. And so they try to stop it by making him suffer. So they string him out on a cross and are just destroying him, and they lift him up. And basically, his soul isn't going to be released. It's going to be trapped. So he's never going to ascend. He's going to suffer forever. So he's absolutely battered, and Lowell and Bolt and List are all just dead. All the Wiccan dogs are just being slaughtered. And so basically they have an archer just from the top of the wall shoot out. And that's all the mercy that Pormquil granted that day. They shoot the arrow out and mercifully end him and let his soul be taken. And the crows fly up, and there's like dark. It's a huge event, a transformative event, and it's absolute chills, but it's absolutely awful to read. It's brutal. And it only gets worse from there. I hate the part that happens next, but there's some other events to get to. So basically, with Mappo and Akiriam's group, with Fiddler and Crocus and Apsalar and her father and Iskaril Pust, they get to a place where there's like a bunch of stones, and if you fall through the stones, it takes you to a portal to one of the Aziths. So Iskaril Pust falls through one. They think he's dead, but later it's revealed that he's alive, and he meets up with a girl. Now they're out there still, and they're plotting. Okay, whatever. I can't stand Iskaril Pust as a character. His mutterings and murmurings were incredibly annoying to me. I know some people will absolutely love it and absolutely dig it. Personally, not for me. I found him annoying. Now I can get why people will like him, but it's just it was too much for me. And then Ikariam and Mappo fall through, and so Crocus and Fiddler and Apsalar are like, oh no, and they're really sad, and Fiddler's like, I lost my friend with Mappo, because they'd really bonded, so they fall away, and they're not sure to where. And so then eventually they find out how to fall through the right one, and they fall through, and they land in Quantali, specifically in Malaz, I believe. And so they're there, and they've made it through to the other side, and have survived. And they, when they're in the Azeth, they meet Ikariam's father, who says that Ikariam has no memory of him. I'm sure all of that will be more important later on. Didn't mean too much to me yet, but I'm sure it's planting the seeds for later payoffs. And so Callum ends up getting stabbed in the back by Pearl and thrown overboard, so that for Topper, he's doing this for Topper, so that he can't get to Lysine. But Callum swims ashore. It's an absolutely brutal scene, and then the action is so good. Callum then goes through the streets of Malaz City, just murdering all these claw. So all the claw are coming from him, and he's just killing them all. So Topper knows that Pearl has failed him, and he's like, okay, I'll deal with Pearl later. But then Callum is killing all of Topper's men. And then when you finally think that Topper's men have got him, because he's been stabbed through like 4 times, Manala shows up on Callum's horse, and she has come to rescue him. And now they're both going together to kill the Empress, to kill Lysine. So Callum's like, why did you follow me? And Lysine's like, and Manala's like, are you dense? And so she's clearly showing that she loves Callum. So Callum's like, oh, wow. And he's like, I haven't considered this. I haven't considered letting my guard down, but he does. And so it seems like he also loves Manala. How sweet. This is basically a hallmark. So they're on their way to assassinate Lysine, is their current plan. And meanwhile, Apt kills a bunch of people who is still following Callum with the little boy on his shoulder with the eyes poked out. And that Guardian is still following. And Apt meets up with... Apt and the little boy meet up with Apsalar and her father and Fiddler and Crocus. And so the four of them are being led by Apt to go and help Callum because they're like, oh, shoot, go assassinate the Empress. This can't end well for you. And so they're going back to meet up with Callum. It has been like 800 pages since Callum and Fiddler were together. So the reunion that you eventually get is so good. But that doesn't happen yet because we have to go back to where it absolutely mangles and puts your heart in a blender. So basically Pormquil's like, we've got to do something. So he sends all his people out to go and fight the battle. But Duker sees that this is a trap. So he realizes that it's a trap orchestrated by Malak Rel, who has been a traitor this whole time and is working for Corbeil-Odom and Cadmus Relo, and is not actually a good advisor to Pormquil. He's a sleazy, chubby man. And so, meanwhile, Pormquil has been being told horrible things by Nethpera, the vile noble who was on the chain of dogs all the way along. And now Nethpera has the audacity to say that Coltaine was brutally treating the civilians. What did you want him to do? He was keeping you guys alive. He marched you through impossible situations. You should be dead, Nethpera. So Nethpera is bad-mouthing Coltaine, and he's bad-mouthing Duker to Pormquil. So Pormquil's like, you guys will be dealt with because you guys were unfairly treating Malazan civilians. And so Duker has had enough. He's just seen his friend, a leader in Coltaine who he respected, brutally murdered outside of the city gates. And this guy, this chubby little guy who made every step of the way impossible, this noble, has the audacity to badmouth him. So he kicks him, and it's maybe the most satisfying part of the book. Snaps his neck and ends him. Duker lashed out and killed him because he'd had enough. And it's something that I was fully behind as I was reading the book, which maybe I shouldn't have been, but still, it was immensely satisfying. So Duker goes out with Pormquil, but he meets Captain Keneb, who's Manala's brother-in-law, who Callum got to Aren. So Captain Keneb has become friends with Commander Blistig, and so Duker kind of gives the hint to Captain Keneb, hey, we have a Gistig guy, which means something to them. I can't remember what it means. It means Malak Rel's a traitor. So he's like, hey, we've got a traitor here. Go tell Blistig. And so he kind of tells that in code. So Duker's instructed, unfortunately, to ride out with Pormquil's men. So they ride out into battle, and it is, of course, a trap, which Duker knew it was a trap, orchestrated by Malak Rel, and so basically it's left Aren open, and so the entire 10,000 soldiers are forced to lay down their weapons, because Pormquil's an idiot and nothing like Coltaine. What a fraudulent high fist. And so Duker saw this coming, and so Corbeil-Odom's like, we have Aren, and Duker's like, no you don't, because he managed to get the word to Commander Blistig and Captain Keneb, and they have managed to keep like 200 or 300 soldiers inside of Aren, and they have shut the gates again and kept the people out. So they still don't have Aren, and so Duker knows that those 200 to 300 men will be able to keep the city long enough for Tavor to come back with reinforcements. So because of Duker, the city and those refugees that are inside that marched the chain of dogs are still alive, as well as Neither and Nil, who were safely inside of there. But Pormquil gets his head lopped off, and Malak Rel reveals his true colors as the traitor he is. Pormquil's absolutely baffled. And Duker is given the same treatment as all 10,000 soldiers. And so it's known as the Fall or something like that, as out on Aren Way, the road that stretches in front of this port city, in front of the ocean. Trees line it. And they're all nailed up to it with spikes. 9,999 soldiers. And lastly, Duker is put up on this and dies. When I read that, my heart sank all the way out of me. I was told that these are hard reads at times, but man, that was a hard read. Because Dooker is, what a character. He's my favorite character, and he's probably a top 10 favorite character I've read in any book, in any fiction. He's absolutely phenomenally written. Love Dooker. He's great. And when he dies there, it's like, I thought he was going to make it out. As all the people fell around him, you think, I thought he was going to make it out. And so it is crushing when the historian is finally nailed peg by peg into the tree. And he has like a last thought that he is truly alone and in agony, and he's ready to go because he's in pain, and he's in emotional pain. And he's like, I'm the last one left behind. Everyone else went before me. And he's like, now I'm going to go and join probably, he doesn't know Heberick's still alive, but he's like, now I'm going to join Heberick and Culp and Coltaine and Bolt and Lull and List and Chenid, and the list goes on that he lists in his mind as he's just hanging there, and then awareness fades and he's gone. That was the second last chapter of the book, and I just wanted to put it down. That is an absolutely heavy note. The Chain of Dogs is such an amazing, epic story, and it ends on such a feeling of hopelessness, as the war just was too much to overcome, even to these great soldiers as they have been traveling through. And so then we go over to where Callum has a discussion with the Empress, but the Empress is not there. It is a ruse. She is speaking through a corpse, and so this corpse has a discussion with Callum, showing that Lysine has immense power. And Lysine basically reveals something that's pretty crazy. We know that back in Gardens of the Moon, there's a dangerous force to the south that is gathering. I can't remember the name of it. It begins with a C. But they are very dangerous people rising in the south of Genebacus. This force is rising. So she's like, well, basically, I didn't actually outlaw Dooker. Talking about Dooker again. She's like, she tells Callum, you shouldn't kill me because I orchestrated this. Me and Dujek One Arm are working together. I say that I've outlawed him and Taishran, but actually I've made it appear that way so that the people of Darujistan and Kaladin Brood and Animander Rake all ally with them because they need to be strong to face the threat that's coming from the south. And if they were still allied with the Malazan Empire, we would all lose. And so basically she's made them appear to be enemies of the Empire, even though Dujek One Arm and Taishran are still in the know. That means Whiskey Jack's not in the know. So I thought that was important to note. But now Callum knows this, and so he's like, all right, I won't kill you right now. Only reason he says this is because he knows it's a corpse he's talking to, showing Lysine's immense power, and he knows he can't actually kill her, but he's agreeable to it. He's like, all right, I won't kill you. And so but as he's leaving, Topper comes back and is like, oh shoot, Lysine's a corpse, so she's elsewhere. So he's been fooled too. So Callum and Manala leave, and they're trapped by the remaining claw, and so you think it's going to be bad. And then out of nowhere, Apt shows up with the boy on his shoulder, and Crocus and Apsalar show up, and Apsalar's dad, and Fiddler. And there's such a warm embrace as Fiddler and Callum meet up again. It's absolutely... It warmed my heart. After my heart broke as Dooker died in agony, which was awful when Dooker died in agony there. After that scene, my heart was just, ugh. And then the Fiddler and Callum's reuniting just brings my spirits up in the next chapter. It's a very nice scene as they reconnect after so long in the book. And then they're kind of whisked away to Shadow Throne and Cotillion. Well, just Shadow Throne now, but... Oh, sorry, I forgot a big twist that was revealed like halfway through the book. It's kind of easy to figure out, but Shadow Throne is Kellenved, because we know Kellenved and Dancer were assassinated by Lysine in mysterious circumstances. We don't know exactly how, but we find out they ascended. So Kellenved ascended to become the god known as Shadow Throne, and Kellenved's right-hand man, Dancer, ascended to become Cotillion, who's one that had possessed Apsalar/Sari in the first book. That's a lot of information. But anyways, Shadow Throne kind of takes them into his chamber and meets with them because Apt is a servant of Shadow Throne. So Apt has delivered Callum, Apsalar, Crocus, Apsalar's dad, Fiddler, and Manala, all to Shadowthrone. And so he's like, what am I going to do with you guys? And so basically he's making a barter with them, which they feel uncomfortable about, because they're like, if a god is reasoning with us and making a deal with us, that can't be good. So I'm sure it can't be. And basically Absalar's like, please just deliver me and my father back to the coast. We want to live in, now I'm forgetting the name of the continent, Quantali, at the Itko-Kanese coast where we were from, and live out a quiet life. Crocus is like, I want to go too. So he snaps his fingers and the three of them disappear. Where to? We don't know yet, but hopefully they are safe. I suspect that we will see them again. Then Callum and the girl that he now likes, why am I forgetting her name now? Manala. They basically show that they like each other and that they're tired of war. So he's like, here, have some children. And he snaps his finger, and then they're somewhere with 1,300 children. And so now they have a bunch of refugee children. I'm not sure from where. Maybe it's from 7 cities. I'm not for sure yet. It didn't really say. But now they are with a bunch of children back in the real world. As for Fiddler, they're like, he's like, do you want to go back with the bridge burners? And Fiddler's like, no. I'd like to eventually join with the bridge burners, but I feel like I need to go back to 7 cities because of what I've seen there. And he's like, the Malazans are going to need help if we want to take back 7 cities against the force that we now face. So he asks to go to 7 cities. And so he's going to re-enlist and become a soldier under Tavor's army. And so he's going with Tavor to go and back up Blistig and Kenib at Aren and try to fight back. So this is leading to what will eventually be a head-to-head between Tavor's forces, which he has Blistig, Kenib, and Fiddler on, and they're going to be fighting against Shaik's forces of 7 cities, which Shaik is now actually Felisin, Tavor's sister, so it's going to be the sister head-to-head, and Felisin's followers include Heberic and Leomin and the Toblakai dude, and tons of other people, including Corbeladom, and Camus Relo, the mage, and the X-Fist. Lots of information. And so that's setting up a big battle that will be happening in 7 cities later. And we're told that there's a big battle going on. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to mention, Callum basically at one point does like a FaceTime call through an orb to Quick Ben to see how they're doing over there. And Quick Ben's like, well, we're still alive. But they seem to be fighting for their lives in Darujistan on Jedabakis against this unknown force that is coming for them. And Baruch is mentioned as well there. So apparently it sounds like they've all teamed up, which I'm assuming is going to be the plot of Book 3, and there's some force that's attacking them. And so this is what's going to be the lead into Book 3. Now, another important thing that happens is some people who are followers of Baruch have come and have retrieved the body of Duker, thinking that it's Coltaine. There's a reason for that. I forgot to mention earlier, there's like a little vial that grants good luck or something. And so they bring it, and he has the name of... There was a Marine that he really loved, a female Marine that he had a romantic relationship with during the Chain of Dogs. And he never wanted to learn her name because he didn't want to be attached to her in case she died. Eventually, she did perish somewhere along the journey, probably in the last part of it. And so her name is kept on his body, which he'd never even learned. And so they recover that body thinking that it's Coltaine's body since he has the vial, and they're going to take it back to Baruch. So maybe my boy Duker can be revived, which would be great. So that leaves off on a little bit of a hopeful note there. What's the other kind of epilogue plot points? Oh, Mappo and Icarium land at Aren Way, so they land right there with all the dead soldiers, and Mappo sees it, and he's heartbroken by all that he sees. And picking their way through the bodies are Stormy, Jessler, and Truth, so they're also there. And I think it was a bloodbath in Deadhouse Gates. I'm sure Book 4, which I believe will return to the same setting, is going to be an even bigger bloodbath. So I'm worried for the characters who are left there. I like Kenib and Stormy and Jessler and Truth. What's going to happen to all these guys? So anyway, Stormy, Jessler, and Truth are there, and they're picking their way through the bodies. And Truth finds 2 dogs that are still alive. One of the Wiccan cattle dogs is still alive, as well as the little rat dog is still alive with their bones broken in the aftermath of the battle. And so Mappo heals them with a potion when he meets up with them. And Stormy and Gessler are looking for Duker, who they'd met and befriended back at the forest, and Duker and Coltaine had sent them forward, and so they're looking for the body, and they find it, and they find it before Baruch's people come and take the body away, and so they're obviously perturbed by it. But when Truth asks if they found him, they tell him no, because they don't want to break his kind of more innocent heart. And so Truth's like, oh, there's still a chance he's alive then, and that's what they tell him. And Gessler and Stormy are pretty sad about it, which is sobering. Mappo then awakes Icarium, who has lost his memories again, and goes back into the wilderness. So basically, Mappo and Icarium are back to square one, right where we learned about them, where we were introduced to them at the beginning of the book. They're basically right back to that stage at the end of the book. Icarium doesn't really remember a lot, but Mappo's shown his friendship. Also, it was revealed to us that Mappo thinks that Icarium was responsible for killing his entire tribe and his family, but this was a lie planted by Icarium's father and the Azith, the keeper of the House of Azith. So there's a lot going on. Trying to remember this off the top of the dome is a little tricky. I see that this video is going to be very long indeed as a review. Holy cow. So trying to talk about the things I like in this book. I like almost all of it, but really the Chain of Dogs is just a masterpiece of writing. So this book, in contrast to Gardens of the Moon, it feels like I know that I was jumping around a lot, but it makes sense for some reason. It feels like logical jumping around, as opposed to Gardens of the Moon, where it was very hard to rapidly change settings so quickly for me. Here, it felt more natural somehow, which is interesting. It felt more linear somehow, for some reason, even though there's a lot going on in this one too. I feel like Gardens of the Moon and Deadhouse Gate actually flow together really well. I know people say there's a disconnect between them, but the plot points, I'm seeing the patterns emerge, and I'm seeing where the threads are going. So I'm excited to read books 3 and 4, and I know 5, I think, is going to be a prequel to it all, so that's probably going to throw me for a loop and reset my system. But I'm going to be starting on book 3 as soon as I end this video, so expect my review in a few months after this. I'm absolutely loving the series so far. So how does this compare to Gardens of the Moon? It's different. It's actually very different. The tone is just brutal and dark, and sometimes a really hard read, but it's very philosophical. And the setting, I don't like the setting as much, I don't think, in a savage desert land than in a more adventurous, typical fantasy land. I love the bridge burners, so having less of them was a little hard at first, but I really found characters to root for with the Marines, with Duker, with the Chain of Dogs. If I were to rank the plots, I'd say the Chain of Dogs plot is the best plot. Then I'd say is Felison's arc, which is a tragic arc, but I'd say that's my second favorite. Then third is probably Fiddler and Apsalar and Crocus trying to get their way to the Deadhouse, along with Callum in his quest to kill the Empress. And last has to be Mappo and Icarium for now, but I do enjoy their friendship and those characters a lot. But to me, it's the least interesting plot point going on in this book compared to all of the others. The Chain of Dogs is just unlike any other. I walked the Chain of Dogs, and it was absolutely incredible, and there's no words for it. It was an experience. It was an experience. It was one of those moments where you're like, I'm never going to read something this crazy ever again in my life. It was an experience. And so I am a huge fan of these books so far. I'm absolutely loving them. Do I like it more than Gardens of the Moon? If the whole book was all Chain of Dogs, yes. There's some stuff that I feel is a little weaker, maybe. I don't know. It's sounding like it's a mixed bag, but it's not. This entire book is a masterpiece. It's fantastic. But I feel that way about Gardens of the Moon. So it's hard to compare. I think I slightly prefer Deadhouse Gates to Gardens of the Moon, just because the Chain of Dogs is absolutely propping it up to just have the edge over Gardens, maybe slightly. It's absolutely a masterpiece. So I expected that reading this series, book 1, since I really like book 1, which most people are kind of more mixed on, I was expecting that I'd not like book 2 as much. But honestly, my enjoyment of the series has just been like amazing to just like elevate it somehow. I didn't think it was possible to elevate to be any more enjoyable or any better than Gardens of the Moon, but somehow Deadhouse Gates was more enjoyable than Gardens of the Moon. It was such a stark experience. His commentary on life, his philosophical commentary on warfare, on human nature, it's so fascinating. And the raw brutality, the interactions and friendships of the characters, the situations, it is just an unparalleled imagination that it takes to craft a story like this. The tapestry of this story is just insane. It is meticulous. It is brilliant. It is delightfully dark and grim. It's amazing. Like, I just love this book so much. It's why I've spent an hour and 40 minutes just talking about it off the top of my head. If anyone has made it to the end of this video, you are a legend. But yeah, Gardens of the Moon was amazing, and Deadhouse takes it maybe a step further and is maybe even better. So I'm absolutely loving this series. I cannot wait to delve into book 3. Before I forget, the epilogue of this book is amazing. There is a widowed woman in a random town in 7 cities that we've never met before. And her child, it seems like she's had a miscarriage maybe, and the fetus is dead. And then all of a sudden, the crows come up and descend on her. And now she feels the baby stir. So maybe Coltaine, when he was nailed to the cross and the arrow went in his forehead and the crows descended on him and picked him up, maybe Coltaine is still alive. Maybe his spirit has been transferred by the crows and put into this woman as a fetus to be reborn. So that was a very interesting epilogue. And the way it's written is so exciting. It's like a post-credit scene. It had me like, oh man, what's gonna happen? So yeah, that was amazing. I just finished reading that bit, and it was amazing. So yeah, I am so excited to figure out what happens next. There's so many things that I'm interested in, so many plot points I'm interested in. I'm excited to get back to Jenna Bacchus with book 3, but now I'm also excited about 7 Cities as well. I didn't think I'd like 7 Cities as much as Jenna Bacchus when I started reading it, but now I like them both equally, you know? So I'm so excited to find out what's going to happen next. There's so many moving pieces on this chessboard, so much that I feel I don't know. I feel like we had a little peek behind the curtain with all those maps that showed other continents, and I'm excited to delve into what's next and see what happens. So if Gardens of the Moon was a 10 out of 10, this is a 10.1 out of 10. It's absolutely terrific. I love Deadhouse Gates, and I'm just going to start on, is it Memories of Ice next? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm starting on Memories of Ice. So hopefully some of y'all will stick around for my Memories of Ice review as I'm continuing to make my way through the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. This is a absolute journey. It's an absolute odyssey, and I am really enjoying the ride so far. Really enjoying these. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a live stream discussing this book soon with my pal Magneto Alex. We did one for Gardens of the Moon. It's a little bit chaotic, but it was a ton of fun. And so we'll be delving more into this book on the live stream together, bouncing our thoughts back and forth off each other. So stay tuned for that live stream. It will be coming at some point. So that's kind of my plan. Make a book review of all the books as I'm reading through them with my initial thoughts after finishing each book, and then do a live stream afterwards with my pal who's read them all as well, and do kind of a podcast live stream on them. And so yeah, that's kind of the plan going forward. I'll see you for Memories of Ice at some point in the future, and see you for the Deadhouse Gates discussion stream. This book is phenomenal. It is shocking. It is insane. It is like jaw-dropping. It's quite something. So yeah, I could not have enjoyed this book more. I can't wait to delve into more of it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and thanks to all the Malazan fans who were commenting on the last video. Really appreciate all of you guys for showing love to someone who's finding these books for the first time. You guys have been really great, and a great testament to the passion of the fandom. I see all these awesome pieces of fan art on Reddit. It's a great group. It's a great fandom, and I'm really excited to kind of be joining the throngs of fans for Malazan. This series already feels like the most underrated series of all time because it's feeling like the best thing I've ever read of all time. And yeah, I've not been this enthralled and engrossed in a book series in a long time. So yeah, I'm super enjoying these, and until next time, see you guys.